So rule one of ad tech is never follow Terry Kawaja on stage. You can never compete with his slides, and you can never compete with his funny voices. So I'm not even gonna try. I'm just gonna leverage everything Terry just said. I wonder if I can go back. Nope. I wanted to steal his slide. When Terry shows a slide that's a triangle of the most banal uses of AI, like faking Gordon Gekko's voice, that doesn't use a huge amount of energy to generate. But as you go up that triangle, what you'll find is that the more sophisticated the use of AI, the more energy that AI uses. And the more energy, the more carbon, the more potential environmental impact. So last year, as Frank mentioned, I had heart surgery. I set the Kilimanjaro of my recovery to be here on this stage 30 days after my surgery. And I made it. I was a little frail looking and maybe not my fully robust self, but I was here. And one reason it was so important for me to be here was because this group of people, look around. Look how many people have stayed in our busy lives with so many things happening to be part of making our industry better, making it cleaner, trying to make a meaningful impact in the world in an industry many of us love and care about. This is a place that matters. And I'm so glad and so thankful to ShareThrough and Equative for doing it again this year. It's really, really important for many of us to be here. And I think that if we are going to follow Terry's advice and bring more AI into our lives and into our work, we need to know the consequences. Now, he quoted a false stat, which will give him a free pass on, because so far, Luma is not a Scope3 customer. We'll try to sign them up. It is true that there are cases where 1 million ad impressions would result in a round-trip plane ticket. But on the average in the US, that's not the case. And in fact, the carbon footprint of an ad impression has dropped significantly over the 3 years since the industry really started this project. And I'd like to send a big round of applause and a thank you to John Osborne and AdNet Zero for all the work they've done in leading the cause for our industry. So now it's a fifth of a plane flight. It's still a lot. And it doesn't mean that we can go buy ad impressions willy-nilly. We still have to be really focused and thoughtful about how we spend money on advertising. And there are huge differences we've found in different channels. If you buy a digital out-of-home screen that is seen by thousands of people, even though it's a very large screen that may use a lot of energy, it still may be worth the carbon. And so the first big thought I have is it worth the carbon? And as we go up that pyramid of use cases for AI, we have to ask ourselves, is this the most effective way to achieve this task? Am I using AI because it's the best tool for the job? Because it enables something that I've never done before? Or is it just a really cool way to go tell my colleagues that I'm cutting edge and super smart? That's all good. I use AI sometimes and I'm maybe that wasn't the most effective way for me to achieve that. But then again, going and browsing the web, imagine you go to a website that has 20 ads that auto-refresh and you're sitting there trying to find the information you want. What is the carbon footprint of that website browsing session versus my ad-free experience with Claude? That's a good, useful question for us to ask. Now, I'm not asking anyone to do the math of you're sitting at your computer, you're should I go to Google or should I go to Claude? Should I go browse for this or should I I can just see you all getting your calculators out and being you know what, I'm gonna ask AI the answer to that question. It's a lot easier. And now we're back in the rabbit hole. Calculator or AI to calculate the footprint of AI? Don't do that. So here's the key takeaway from where we are in the industry today. AI has the power to dramatically improve the effectiveness of advertising. And it also has the power to dramatically increase the footprint of advertising. We are in a conundrum, just like we were 3 years ago before all the good work of the Green Media Sustainability Framework, or GMSF, our very well and concisely named framework for measuring the environmental impact of every ad impression. Without measurement, we have no idea. And I would ask that any use of AI at any kind of scale needs to have measurement attached. You need to tell your engineers, when you use AI, I want you to plug in a framework to understand the carbon footprint. Now, there's not a lot of frameworks out there. I spent the last 8 weeks on a working group with the Green Software Foundation to try to figure out a global framework for how to calculate what they call the Software Carbon Index, or SCI score, for AI. And the goal is to have an ISO-certified way of calculating the carbon footprint of AI. That's not an ad industry thing. This is actually ISO. This is a global framework. And after 8 weeks, like 20 academics, I was by far the dumbest person in the room, Miro boards with huge numbers of Post-it notes. The summary was, we have to think about this some more. So we have a framework of, what we need to do next. It's going to take a long time to address every single issue in measuring the carbon footprint of AI. But I think the key factors in this process are well known to us. One is, where we do training and inference matters. So if you do that in Virginia, where the power is largely coal, the grid mix is very carbon intensive. If you do training and inference in Finland, it's mainly hydro-powered and it's nice and cool, and so the grid mix will be fairly low carbon. There's a large range of places that we can do all this computation. So one very obvious point is that moving computation to where energy is green is good. So maybe that is a Gordon Gekko quote. Green energy is good. We can do time shifting as well, because especially with renewables and solar power, when the sun's shining, the grid mix is greener. So that's an obvious opportunity. Model choice matters. There are big models, there are small models. There are, effectively different generations of model. So some of the newer models use techniques like mixture of experts, or MOE, which is a fancy way of saying only part of the model is used to actually compute. So even though you might train a really big model, you can only use a little bit of it. It's like using part of your brain because you're, reading to your kid the same book you've read 100 times, but the rest of your brain is thinking about something else. That's basically what these models can do. So you don't have to activate all your neurons every single time you do a task. So choosing the right model for the job makes a huge impact on how much energy a model uses. Different tasks also use different amounts of energy. So text, if you've heard of tokens, one word represents 1.3 tokens. That's just basically converting words into numbers. So the word the might be 16521, and cat might be 442116. That's how AI works. It actually doesn't know anything about words. All it knows is it takes all of these things, converts them to numbers, and then looks for correlations between different numbers. So if you say the, and then you say cat, we can all imagine the next word, right? Purrs, or walks, or pukes on my floor and my daughter won't clean it up, even though it's her cat. You can predict that outcome just like I can. All AI does is predict the likelihood that this sequence of numbers predicts the next number. That's a relatively efficient way to use AI. But when you get to images, what it does is it takes all the pixels in the image and takes each chunk of the image and turns that into effectively a number. And so an image might represent 2,000 tokens. It's not exactly how it works. But if you think about pasting an image into your AI program versus copying and pasting the text, it could be dramatically more expensive from a computation perspective. Which is not to say you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying be cognizant that the more information density you pass into an AI, the more work it has to do, the more computation it does, the more carbon gets spit out the other side. So all of this may be obvious to some of you, but I think for many of us, AI is very magical. It's a black box. You type some stuff and great outcomes happen. But the more we want to use AI and agents to achieve things, we start needing to ask the questions of what is it actually doing? How much energy is it using? What is the trade-off of all these different tasks? So I think this is a useful way for us to go forward. I'm not going to give you an hour-long lecture on everything I've learned about AI sustainability and efficiency. I would encourage you, though, to go follow, for instance, sustainableai.substack.com, which is a Substack that one of my colleagues at Scope3 authors. Aya was a policy wonk on the Hill. Now she runs policy for Scope3. And what she's writing about is not just how does AI work from a sustainability perspective, it's also what can we do from a policy perspective. And she just did a series about China AI policy versus the UK policy versus France versus the US. And it may seem very far from our everyday lives, but how we think about AI from a policy perspective has huge implications on geopolitics, on the energy grid, and on what the world's going to look like for our kids. Very concrete example. There was a really big deal in Silicon Valley last week. There's this company that you've never heard of that basically builds out all the data centers for OpenAI. And they just bought, I think it was like a 5 gigawatt gas turbine for $100 million. And what they're basically saying is, we're going to fuel the AI revolution for OpenAI with natural gas, with methane. They did not make a $100 million purchase of wind turbines and of solar panels. They are saying, we are going to use fossil fuels for the largest AI build-outs in the country. This is what Silicon Valley's solution to the climate crisis is. Drill, baby, drill. And I don't know how you feel about that. I know that, let you in on a secret, I'm a Democrat, and a progressive Brooklyn Democrat at that. And don't judge me. But when Joe Biden decided to open up drilling in Alaska, I was pissed. And I was like, man, this guy is not understanding the needs of this planet at a moment of climate change. And I was like rabble-rousing with my friends, like this Biden guy, like why do we have this fake progressive in the White House? Well, guess what we have now? We have a Silicon Valley venture capitalist as the vice president of the company, that was a Freudian slip. Wow. But I was right. We are actively throwing out environmental policy to make sure that we can build as much AI as we possibly can. And every one of us participates in this process. I use AI. I'm building products using AI. Isn't that hypocritical for me to tell you that AI is being built with fossil fuels, and yet I'm building products with AI? There were some very nice people on LinkedIn who decided that last week when Scope3 announced that we're using AI in our products, we're like, you hypocrite, you're a terrible person, you're a fraud, you're a scam. Didn't make me feel great. The thing is, I can do math, and all of you can too. We have to understand that not using AI is like saying, I'm not going to drive in a car ever again, or I'll never fly, right? Anyone here given up plane travel fully? Anyone here not taking a flight in a year? You're awesome. Congratulations. Do you have family that lives a few hours away? Oh, Amtrak. You've taken Amtrak to the West Coast? Oh. I have friends who do that, and I do not recommend the Amtrak to the West Coast thing. That's the point, is like, I'm not gonna not see my family because I love this planet. I do love it, I just don't love it as much as I love my mom, at least as far as she knows. My point is, We're going to make choices that leverage AI. We're going to do it because it makes us better at our jobs. It makes our products more powerful. And I think what Terry said is right. If we can invest a little bit of energy in AI that has a massive impact on the overall carbon footprint of what we do as part of our jobs, it's worth it. And going back to where I started, is it worth the carbon? Is it worth the energy? I posted on LinkedIn a couple days ago about the math we did about deciding to run a bunch of the content on the internet through AI to try to understand brand safety and suitability. And what we found was that we ran that analysis last year. It was about 1.4 kilotons, or so 1,400 tons of carbon to use AI on a broad swath of the internet. But in 1 year, that number has dropped to below 200 tons, and it's very quickly going down below 100 tons. Now 100 tons sounds like a lot, right? If you think about one campaign that we ran last year, where we saved thousands of tons of carbon, this one investment of 100 tons of carbon doesn't just run on one campaign, it runs on thousands. And if you're talking about investing 100 tons of carbon to save thousands or tens of thousands of tons, isn't that worth it? I think we all have to make this math part of everything we do. I'm not saying you should stop marketing. Anybody here stop doing digital advertising because of the carbon footprint of advertising? Anybody here lose their job because they stopped doing digital advertising? Yes, you wouldn't be here. The point is, we have to do our jobs. We have to find customers online. That's our freaking job. We are going to use ad impressions to do that. We are going to use technology to do that. But we can measure. We can make smart, informed choices about where to invest our carbon, and we can make sure that we're holding ourselves and our organizations accountable for the net impact of our choices. Were the thousands of carbon you invested in your last ad campaign worth it? Did you sell cars? Did you sell insurance? Did you sell, whatever you sell? Or not? Because if you didn't achieve your marketing goals, you wasted a whole bunch of carbon. And that's really where this comes back to media quality. Because if you're going to invest carbon in buying advertising, I think you have an obligation to make it the most efficient and effective use of carbon that you can imagine. And when I say carbon, I also mean money. Why are you wasting money buying ads that no one ever sees? Why are you wasting money buying bot traffic? I guess unless those are agentic bots that actually are like making purchase decisions, because that might be the future. Maybe my anti-bot thesis needs to be updated. But broadly speaking, anything you buy that doesn't work is a waste of money and a waste of carbon. And I would ask all of you to just go think about every vendor, every publisher, every process, everything you do through the lens of carbon. And I know you all care about this because you're here. I know many of you work with, whether it's Scope3 or other vendors that can help measure the carbon footprint of advertising. I think we've done a great job of making that a standard for many campaigns and for many companies who've said this is a must. But I doubt any of you are doing that for AI today. And that's a problem. And I doubt that you're asking your vendors how they use AI. When we started doing the GMSF work a couple years ago, AI was not a major part of the advertising ecosystem. Today, every single company has a .ai in their name. Mm-hmm. And yet, we're not holding them accountable for their AI and how it uses carbon. John, does GMSF mention AI? Not a lot. Yeah, that means we have to rev it. We need like GMSF.ai because it has to account for the fact that all of us need to use AI to be competitive. We need to use it to be efficient and effective. We must be AI forward, but we have to be AI smart and AI sustainable. So I hope that as you go forth, please help AdNet and the industry make AI a core part of how we measure. Please contribute to both at Net Zero initiatives, join the Green Software Foundation, do anything you can to help your engineering organizations start to leverage AI measurement tools, and ask your vendors simple questions. Why are you using AI for this? What models do you use? Did you think about energy use? Where do you physically run your models? Why are you doing that in Virginia? Why are you doing that at peak energy times? These questions will drive OpenAI and Anthropic and Microsoft and Google and Meta to change how they build models, to change how they run models, to stop buying gas turbines, because all they care about is their customers. It's an obsession. If customers care about sustainability, so do they. And if you don't ask these questions of your engineers, they won't do it. And if you don't ask these questions of your vendors, they won't change their behavior. The reason the advertising industry has dropped its carbon footprint so significantly over the last 3 years is because you're here. It's because you've asked those hard questions.